Jake, thanks very much. Happening now, breaking news, a historic, potentially game-changing moment for President Obama. Nearly 1 week since George Zimmerman's not guilty verdict. The first African-American president of the United States, as you rarely see him, sharing his very personal, sometimes painful experience as a black man living in this country and declaring, and I'm quoting him now, Trayvon Martin could have been me. Just ahead, the speech, the national conversation about race it's generating, the legal impact, and what this means for President Obama's legacy. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me.
Powerful, emotional words from President Obama, speaking publicly for the first time since the verdict about Trayvon Martin's death and drawing a uniquely personal connection between himself and the millions of African-American men living in the United States. The surprise remarks, almost 20 minutes in length, in the White House briefing room, coming nearly a week to the day that George Zimmerman was declared not guilty. Amid growing demands for him to address the issue, the president did so today. Our chief White House correspondent, Jessica Yellen, is joining us with some behind-the-scenes look at how all of this came together. Jessica, what are you finding out?
Hi, Wolf. As you point out, there were calls for President Obama to speak out in the wake of the verdict all week, especially from within the African-American community. White House officials tell me that President Obama was watching the reaction to the verdict since it came down last weekend. He spoke to his family about the reaction, and he spoke to his team here at the White House. He was watching responses both in the African-American community and in all communities across the country. They tell me those reactions, as you know, quite varied. I'm told that it was last night that he went to his team here at the White House and said that he would like to talk to the nation about the verdict and about Trayvon Martin's death. He'd like to do it in both personal terms and at some length. And he decided with them that the White House press briefing room would be the best place for him to do that. So he surprised us all by stepping behind the podium right before Jay Carney's daily briefing this afternoon. President Obama broke his silence, offering his own experiences as a window into frustrations and sadness in the African-American community.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
He spoke in uncharacteristically blunt and personal terms.
There are very few African-American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very few African-American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator. Those sets of experiences inform how the African-American community interprets what happened one night in Florida. And it's inescapable for people to bring those experiences to bear.
For a president who often offers colorblind answers to questions about race.
The best thing that I can do for the African-American community or the Latino community or the Asian community, whatever community, is to get the economy as a whole moving.
Today's comments were a striking departure.
There's a lot of pain around what happened here.
President Obama said his team is weighing a number of policy responses to Trayvon Martin's death, training state and local officials to avoid racial profiling, encouraging states to reconsider stand your ground laws, backing new programs that support young black men.
Is there more that we can do to give them a sense that their country cares about them and values them and is willing to invest in them?
The president made clear he respects the jury's decision.
They rendered a verdict. And once the jury's spoken, that's how our system works.
but said he believes the reaction to the verdict has to do with something larger.
And that all contributes, I think, to a sense that if a white male teen was involved in the same kind of scenario, that from top to bottom, both the outcome and the aftermath might have been different. I just ask people to consider, if Trayvon Martin was of age and armed, could he have stood his ground on that sidewalk? And do we actually think that he would have been justified in shooting Mr. Zimmerman, who had followed him in a car, because he felt threatened? And if the answer to that question is at least ambiguous, then it seems to me that we might want to examine those kinds of laws.
Well, sources also tell me President Obama has not spoken with Trayvon Martin's parents, although you did hear him acknowledge them in his remarks today and also in his statement over the weekend. I should also point out that the president did suggest in his remarks that he believes race relations are improving in this nation with every generation.
And he cited his own daughters, Sasha and Malia, to make that point, that things are definitely, he said, and he wound up those remarks, things are definitely getting better, but the country is not yet where it should be. I think that was the bottom line, the optimistic note that he wanted to leave us all with.
And he said having a conversation about this now, having a conversation about race in the aftermath of this verdict could help improve race relations into the future, Wolf.
Jessica Yellen over at the White House, thanks very much. Let's continue the conversation right now. Joining us now, the co-founder of the New York City Tea Party, the host of the David Webb Show on Sirius XM Radio. That would be David Webb. Also joining us, the new Crossfire co-host, the former White House official, Van Jones. Let me play this one little clip, guys, and that'll kick off a little discussion between the three of us. The president getting very personal in his comments today. Listen to this.
There are very few African Americans who haven't had the experience of getting on an elevator and a woman clutching her purse nervously and holding her breath until she had a chance to get off. That happens often. And I don't want to exaggerate this, but those sets of experiences inform how the African American community interprets what happened one night in Florida.
Let me start with David. What do you think?
Well, I find it interesting, Wolf, that the president asserts that there are very few African Americans out of the millions that have not had this incident happen to them where someone clutches their purse. And he says, I don't want to exaggerate it. I'd like to know anecdotally how he comes by this evidence.
Well, has it ever happened, David, has it ever happened to you that you went into an elevator and a woman clutched her purse, or that you crossed the street and you saw people locking the doors of their cars? The president said that has happened to him growing up as a young African-American man.
And that has happened to many. It hasn't happened to me that I know of. And rather than focus on this assertion that there is a monolithic block of black people, and this happens to all of you or to most of you, where is the discussion when the president wades into this with the presidential megaphone on things that really, not that this isn't a tragedy, as you and I have talked about, and that this is something we need to talk about because we can't pretend that racism doesn't exist, but we also can't pretend, Wolf, that racism exists everywhere, and that is a dominant part of America.
Let's let Van get into this conversation. First of all, Van, has what happened to the president when he says it happens to virtually every African-American man in the country, has that happened to you growing up in the United States?
Yeah, it certainly has. That happened in the rural South, and when I was at Yale Law School, it happened quite often. And what was interesting...
What exactly happened to you? Give us some specifics.
I remember one time I was trying had been volunteering in the community, and I was leaving the community and going back onto the campus, and there were three white students who were on one side of the street. They saw me coming. They went to the other side of the street, and I really just raised my hand to say hello, and one of them, almost broke into a run. Then she realized I was a student, and everybody kind of laughed nervously. That kind of thing happens, but I think more importantly, the president is supposed to be on key issues the educator in chief. And often presidents will appeal to their personal experience. Ronald Reagan would do that. And sometimes, when you have about a Kennedy or Reagan, they talk about being Irish. You have other people who talk about being Catholic. This president is being the educator-in-chief. He's pointing to his personal experience. I think it's bracing for people, but I don't think it should be such a shock. If we were truly the colorblind utopia that we want to be, people could refer to their own ethnic experiences, and we'd see it as a chance to know each other better. I hope that's where we're going to get to in this discussion.
Go ahead, David.
But to assert that those experiences are similar for everyone or most African Americans, as he puts it, you exaggerate because it's based on anecdotal and experience. I've had a bad experience. In college, I was jumped by a bunch of white guys. It was over a campus party. It wasn't a racial incident as far as I saw it, but I didn't walk away from that going, I'm going to run away from everyone who's white or have animus towards them. And part of what we need to talk about in this country is how we deal with each other. And how we deal with each other is an education that needs to happen. You talk about educator-in-chief, then educate on how we interact as a mosaic that's a nation of many ethnicities, and the differences and the similarities, not just to divide us into black corners, Hispanic corners, female corners. We are one nation.
We are. And one of the things I'd like to say, and I think we can probably agree on this, we are the most diverse country in the history of the world. My kids go to school. There are 37 languages spoken in that school system. They mostly get along. But the part of the challenge we have here, if the president speaks on this, he's wrong. If he doesn't, he's wrong. If he speaks in personal terms, he's wrong. If he speaks in non-personal terms, he's wrong. I think a door has been opened here. I think that most of us have been shocked by how different the reactions have been. I think there's fear in the white community that I have been educated about. Fear that they will be called racist if they try to defend themselves against someone who is black they perceive as a threat. And I think there's fear among white people that they are on trial constantly, that maybe they are racist, and they feel trapped by that. I think there's a door to some empathy, possibly. Maybe they could say, well, hey, maybe these black people somehow feel trapped. I think we all feel trapped. Maybe there's a way for us to use this The president called for context and conversation, and I think he did a good thing. I think it's a presidential thing, and I think that we should take him up on the offer.
But, there's also fear. There's also fear when you look at the vile hatred that has come from people in the black community towards whites, towards me, towards others, just because of even a difference in political parties, which, by the way, this issue with Trayvon was not a left-right issue. This was an issue of a crime that was committed and adjudicated in the court system. But the vile hatred that goes out based on some perceived black versus white is something that the president has stoked. Whether he could have spoken on this issue. He could have spoken succinctly, could have used personal experience, but in this case, it looks like he wants multiple bites at the apple while claiming the high road. And unfortunately, in this one, I think any president, right or left, doesn't matter, black or white, should have been very much more careful with the presidential megaphone.
All right, Van, hold that thought for a moment, because we have to take a quick break. But I want to get back to that point. Our panel, both Van and David, are staying with us. There's lots to discuss, lots to debate, and we're also going to hear from the parents of Trayvon Martin. They have literally just responded to the president's speech. You're going to hear all of what they have to say. That's coming up. And George Zimmerman's defense team now also responding. We just got a lengthy statement from the Zimmerman defense team on the president's remarks. We're going to read it to you. Lots going on right here in The Situation.